photographs are from Goa itself. So I'll just go through what I'll be talking about today, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about the Mole campaign as well, which we were doing the mapping component for. So yeah. So I run Technology for Wildlife Foundation. We are a non-profit based out of Panjim here right here. Like I live in Miramar. Our goal is that to amplify conservation impact. So we actually use technology for conservation purposes. We work with a lot of partners and actually make sure that they are making their impact as effective and efficient as possible using the tools of modern technology. Again, the word appropriate here is key. We are quite concerned about technology in general. We're not evangelists for technology, so we're very critical of it. So we only use it when we think it's the right tool. In many cases, the best way forward is actually just a meeting with the community, figuring out what needs to be done on the ground itself, rather than coming in from a technocratic perspective of, okay, use this technology. These two quotes kind of drive our work. So one by William Gibson, the father of cyberpunk, where he said how the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. We take this to mean it's not distributed not just in human society, but across like wildlife and the environment as well. So very much about using tech and trying to distribute its fruits equally. The other by Kentaro Toyama is about how technology only amplifies underlying human intent and capacity. So this is very clearly about if you have malicious intentions, then technology will help you achieve them more effectively and efficiently. And if you have good intentions, then again, tech can help you do that. But it's really important to be coming at this from an outcome perspective, not just about using tech, but seeing what you actually want as an outcome, and then having technology, the tools of technology as ways to actually get there. So again, for us specifically, we focus on two components. We focus on geospatial data analysis, cartography as it's traditionally known, as well as robot operations, which is not really traditionally known as anything. It's quite a new field. So we operate robots to actually collect data, to do various things around conservation. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. So these are our partners. Again, this slide dates back a few months, so we have more partners now, but these are partners. Again, we work across India. We're not really trying very hard to work with partners outside of India right now, but again, these are our partners in Goa specifically, right? So we work with all of these people in different aspects on conservation in Goa itself. Again, I said I live in Panjim. I've been here a few years now, and this is, again, I have a personal connection with the city as well. I really like Panjim. Again, growing up in Calcutta, living in Delhi, I'm used to cities which have like history in them, and Panjim definitely has that, which I like a lot, right? We also have mangroves, we have the beach, lots of nice things, and again, cycling is a great way for me to explore it, and this is a personal cycle map. This is the routes I was doing in the first year of the pandemic, so April of 2020. These routes have expanded quite significantly since then. But yeah, cycling is a good way to connect to a city, and mapping out cycle routes for me was something which was attractive. Again, people have gone on to use data like this. You can collate it and actually make cycle maps of cities, which are used to improve road networks. It's something we're interested in doing, but again, this is how data can be used for mapping purposes. This is all the parks in Panjim, which are like legally recognized as parks. As you can see, there's quite a disparity along the Karanzali Miramar side closer to the shore, and there's almost nothing in Dona Paula, Nagali Hills, Oxdale, that area, right? So again, you can use data like this to actually push for the fact that you want to have a more equitable distribution of parks across Panjim, more green spaces for more people. So again, this is all data which is open data, which we collate, actually make maps like this. This is, again, sticking to the pandemic. This is some work we were doing, again, in the first couple of months of the pandemic. As Vivek mentioned, there were lots of, again, volunteer movements, lots of citizen helplines. The food was running out. So this is just, again, across Goa, and Panjim specifically is the inset on that side of the screen. Just mapping out the data for the government of Goa and the city corporation of Panjim in terms of how, again, in those first few weeks of the pandemic, how many cases were coming in, where was demand the highest, what kind of work was being met, right? So just to visualize that, again, not really conservation cartography, but cartography in the time of disasters. Just another example of how you can actually use mapping for public good. Over here, this map, again, the green and brown map is a terrain map of Goa. The black outline marks Goa itself. This is all satellite-based data, so we can process it to make maps like this quite rapidly. We've used it in this case, for example, to make the map of beaches in Goa, right, on my far left. And now that map, as you can see, I've got the word draft all over it because every time I put this map up on Instagram or Twitter, someone fights with me about it because they're like, you left out my favorite beach, you haven't marked this beach, you spelled this beach name wrong. And which is why it's got draft on it to caveat those, but also that it's a living map. So people come and tell me, okay, you missed this beach out. I'm like, okay, great, where is the beach? Or you spelled this beach name wrong, okay, what's the spelling so I can swap it out. So again, you can actually, when you make your own maps, for purposes else, you can actually swap out things, you can change them, you can edit them. They're not final, right? So all our maps have file names. They go final version 3.2, final version 8, and they're all final. They just go on accumulating. But again, a map is never final in my opinion. They can evolve over time, and especially as more data comes in, as we get better at making maps, we can do more things with them. For example, this is a satellite image of the Tiswadi Peninsula, the northern bit of it, Diwar Island and Churao from 1973. So this is the earliest satellite image I've been able to find for this area from the Landsat series. I have imagery which is about 20 years older from a system of satellites called the Vanguard system, which was again the US, what they were using during the Cold War. Some of that has been declassified as photographs, but this is actually like satellite imagery comparable to what we can get today, where each pixel is, again, 1 square kilometer. And we can use this. In this case, the green represents vegetation, brown represents water, and the gradient in between represents open land, maybe Khazan lands, which aren't heavily forested. And you can see that, again, the tip of Churao, for those who are familiar with it, so right in the Mandavi in the center over there, it's not completely forested because Churao, the island used to be Khazan, like it used to be farmland, and then it became notified as a mangrove forest only later, once there was saline incursion, and then it actually grew mangroves after that. So this map, for example, comparing this with something from much later, from 20, you can actually see differences in cover, in vegetation cover. So this map talks about mangrove cover across the Tiswadi Peninsula. Again, we can use this for various purposes, including what should land development in particular areas be like. So actually compare and contrast a map like this with a map from 50 years earlier to actually see, okay, when you talk about conservation, what do you want to conserve? Are you looking at the future? Are you looking at the past when you're making land use decisions? Again, this is very modern work. This is using drones. So these are 3D models of mangrove patches. So again, we have this continuous record of a stack of data, right, where we can fly our own drones and collect data, make 3D models like this out of it. We have actually done stuff with like virtual reality headsets as well, where you can actually put a headset on and fly through a model like this. So to get people who might not be able to visit the mangroves for whatever reason, whether there's a disability, whether they don't live here, whether travel is hard, to actually experience like the joy of like a mangrove forest for themselves, right? And other kind of stuff we're working at with technology, what we have available at hand. Again, moving on to carbon and climate change, looking at satellite data, you can actually create maps of carbon sequestration as well. And over here, you can clearly see that it's highly correlated to biomass. So the more biomass you have in areas, the more carbon you have sequestered. And again, removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is the crucial component of fighting against climate change. From Goan perspective of living here in Goa, actually, the other component which is important is that biomass is also strongly linked to heat islands. So to actually live in cooler areas, you want to live in areas which are forested, which have trees. You don't want to live in concrete jungles. You don't want to live in a parking lot, right? You want to live somewhere where it's cool, comfortable, the temperature range doesn't fluctuate too much over the year. And Goa as a whole is better than central India in that context, but it's still, if the forests go away, if the carbon vanishes, then the temperature is also going to increase locally for us over here. And that's something we want to avoid. That's very much a goal of conservation, is to ensure that we have good living conditions as well. This is a photograph of Morji Beach up in North Goa. So this is taken facing south. So the drone is flying at about 8 in the morning and facing due south. You can see all the shacks on the beach. What's not visible in this photograph, because they aren't here at this point of time as well, are all the turtles which come and nest on this beach. So further south where the shacks end, you can actually see parts where the forest department does not allow shacks or tourist activity in the form of sunbeds. People can still walk on the beach carefully. You have olive ridley turtles coming up to nest, and they come up every year. Now, with photographs like this, we can see that the shacks, the tourism itself, the sunbeds might be encroaching on turtle nesting beaches, and there is a balance to be had between tourism and wildlife, the interests of wildlife over here. So the idea is that if you can map out where the turtles prefer nesting, then you can demarcate those areas completely, and you have sunbeds out only in areas where turtles don't come, or you have a seasonal rotation. So this is what the forest department in Goa does. So photographs like this taken on a year-by-year basis help them understand how is tourism expanding, because we can, for example, this photograph, the survey we did, which I'll show you a map of as well, we can conduct in about 2.5 to 3 hours. So all the data imagery is all happening within the same day. So you can actually do this repetitively over a few months or few years and collect enough information to make better decisions about managing wildlife sensitive zone such as Morji Beach. So for example, this is the map of the nesting beach itself. You can see the turtle nesting center is up over here, which is where they actually take the fresh new hatchlings, keep them there safely till it's safe to release them into the ocean itself. And this whole beach is where turtles come and nest. So they have data on the points at which nests have been found in the past 20 years. We've mapped that out for them as well. Looking at that with the beach topography, the way the beach is changing over time, we can actually say, okay, if there's erosion happening, then this section of turtle nest is going to, it's not going to be possible for turtles to nest over there in the future. So that kind of planning can be done using drone cartography like this. To contrast the Morji example, this is Wangani Beach again, it's right in Panjim, it's near Donapaula. The Sidade Hotel borders the Wangani Beach, and the new Tata Hotel overlooks it as well. And again, they had an issue last year where they built a new seawall on the beach. And again, it's a disputed seawall. The CRZ laws have been violated, so it is currently under, it's being fought in court at this point of time. But all the maps we had of this area were old survey maps, old plot maps. So to actually look at the old maps, see whether the property line, as the hotel says is their property line, matches what the plot map is, whether they actually build the seawall on their property or on the beach, are all arguments which need to be made in court. And so maps like this are what we use to actually make those arguments, because we can't expect everyone to come to the beach and look at it. Photographs only go so far. So we need maps like this which actually argue for why seawalls on beaches are a bad idea. Again, with Morji as well, a few months after this one was constructed, they built a similar seawall on Morji. Again, to prevent erosion is what the stated purpose. And again, that seawall didn't last for a few months because it wasn't strong enough. So that also got destroyed. Again, recently the guidelines come out that, okay, building seawalls is not all right. And so now again, the next step of the battle is to actually say, okay, can we get this old seawall and the new seawall removed as well? But maps like these are what we're using on social media to actually communicate the problem and to talk about exactly what the argument is. So it's not just words on paper, it's got some kind of context as well. I'm going to go on to Mole. So this is the map of Mole. Again, this map was made very recently. It was in February this year. So we use lots of open satellite imagery, such as from the Sentinel series out of the EU and the Landsat series out of the US. What makes it useful to use it is all free imagery, and we love that we can actually use it for anything we want to and make really compelling products. So this map is from a satellite called Landsat 9, which launched only in November last year, and the data was up and available by February of this year. And again, with the satellite up and the other satellites in the same series as well, we can get images of the same area every 6 days or so. So you can actually do a proper check of whether there's been deforestation in an area over time. So this is just a 3D model of Mole National Park itself. So again, Bhagwan Mahavir National Park and Wildlife Sanctuary in Goa, which is what the rest of my talk is going to be about how, again, we've used cartography to talk about moles both in court as well as on social media and in the public. So mapping Mole. Again, it used to be called Mole. There's some question about the name, in that the name is officially being changed, but we've been calling it Mole, and that's what it's going to be in these presentations. So this is, again, quite ugly. It is a screenshot of clearance data from the government. So this is essentially all the projects in the vicinity of Mole which have applied for forest clearance of some sort in the past 6 years. So again, there's some mining work, there's some transmission line work, again, lots of different things, right? But this is the kind of raw data we actually start working with. Start cleaning it up a little bit. So start taking out topographical sheets from the Survey of India, scanning them in, georeferencing them, pinning them down to actual places on the Earth's surface. All the red you can see on that side is the same data as from the previous map, cleaned up and put into context of some sort. Then we started focusing on what we care about, which is Mole specifically. So just for those of you who aren't familiar with the Mole campaign and what's been happening with it, there were 3 projects which were proposed through the national park right in April 2020, right after the pandemic began and the first lockdown had started. So the transmission line in the north of Mole, a highway through the center, and a railway line in the south. Now the highway and the railway line already exist, so the proposal was to expand them to, in the case of the highway, to double it, in the case of the railway line to also double the number of tracks. The transmission line was a new transmission line. They wanted to cut through pristine forest and actually build a transmission line to connect power from, again, coming in from Karnataka into Goa. This is what we believe would have happened if all 3 projects had gone ahead successfully. So this is, again, it's a cartographic illustration. So as you can see, each of the fragments of Mole which would have been created if all 3 projects had gone ahead have the names of, who would have been pushing, the proponent pushing for the project which would have done it. So there's Sterlite Power up there. There's the National Highway and South Authority of India and the Southwest Railways in the center, Sterlite Power and the National Highway Authority of India on the top over there, and the Southwest Railway on the bottom, right? So again, Mole is already fragmented. You already have a highway and a railway line through it. So again, they aren't very wide, but that's enough to actually fragment a forest, which means that it's not easy for wildlife to cross from one fragment to the other. If they'd done what they wanted to do, which is still on the table as well, then this is essentially, while Mole might have looked contiguous on a map, it would have actually been like this from a ecological point of view. And this is important not just for the wildlife who live there, but for all of us in Goa, right? It's, again, the Western Ghats are where we get our water from. It's where we get clean air from. It's a massive source of carbon sequestration for Goa as well. That might not concern us specifically in Goa, but it does affect, again, the larger public good. So for going to water specifically, this is the map we created, again, using a digital elevation model of Goa itself to actually map out all the water bodies, the flow of water from the Western Ghats down to the coast. So as you can see, the Opa plant, for example, is where Panjim gets its water from, and the source of that comes straight out of the Western Ghats, right? And that's true of every single other water treatment plant in Goa. You need the water to be coming out of the Western Ghats if you don't want saline incursion from the ocean to come up the river. So you need the fresh water flowing out to prevent the salt water from coming in. And this is crucial for Goa's water security. If you want clean drinking water the way we have it, if we don't want to end up like other cities which have contaminated rivers, which are with undrinkable water, then we need to make sure that the green areas, which is where the water comes from, are preserved, right? So this is what this kind of map tells us. Going back to the transmission line specifically, we've got images from, again, aerial images from both sides of what exactly was being proposed. Again, this map was being used for the Central Empowered Committee to show them exactly what was happening in terms of the forest clearance against the actual area itself. So I'll show you a quick video as well of the same area. So as you can see those images over here and the path, we have a drone video following the same path. So that's all forest which follows that path, the pristine forest over there, which was going to be cut down to build the transmission line. So they were going to make a 40 meters width right through that to actually build a transmission line over here, right? So that's the kind of, again, imagery we have to actually, which is compelling, both in court as well as in public, to actually advocate for why you shouldn't cut down forest and think and make better planning, make better plans for this kind of work. So this, again, second the transmission line, the image on my left is of the transmission lines and the point where they terminate. It's a place called Sangod where they cut down about 3,000 trees to build a substation for the transmission tower. There's a close-up of it on this side. As you can see, the clearly marked polygon out over there, the trees have been cut right in that patch. So this is, again, satellite imaging can only go so far. It tells you, okay, there were trees there, they've been cut. But what it actually looked like was this. So this is the actual site itself, and you can see the carcasses of the trees right in the middle over there, right? And this entire area would have been forest and was forest till November 2019, after which it started getting cut down. So these images are from January of last year, and the satellite images are from May of 2021, May 2020, just a few months after it was cut down. Right, so these kind of images, and along with the satellite images, actually show the scale of impact on the ground. And again, if you can look at this and see and multiply this by 1,000-fold, is what the transmission line was going to do to Mole itself. So luckily enough, I can give this presentation happily. I've given versions of this on a more, okay, let's wait and see. But now this is slightly more optimistic at this point of time, because again, there are lots of things which happened in the past few months. So again, sometime in December last year, when this transmission line case particularly was in court, the Supreme Court came out very strongly against the fact that these 3,000 trees which had been cut weren't cut legally, right? So again, they were quite angry about it. A few months later, the Central Empowered Committee itself came out, with they come out already with the recommendations for the entire forest. And again, you've seen the map I showed you in the beginning of the project. So over here, you can actually see what the committee had decided and what they were recommending to the Supreme Court, right? So over here, they've said that the transmission line and the railway line can't go ahead, while the highway needs to go back to environment clearance, needs to be realigned. So that this was, again, this happened in April 2021. But then again, a few months ago, again, this was actually for the railway line, it was a few weeks ago, in that they've currently sent the transmission line and the railway line back to the drawing board. So anything is a new project all the way through. The highway is still pending in court. Again, so this campaign was like lots of people who were involved in the campaign. For more information on the Mole campaign itself, there's an exhibition downstairs, which is again on till tomorrow as well, so go look at that. Again, the photograph is, there's Giulio and Nandini Vello, who've kind of like conceptualized and led the entire campaign, and we lost Giulio just about a year ago, and he was instrumental in the campaign. But it's people like them who actually make the maps important, where they can actually sit, get the data, use whatever's being created from mapping work, from activism, from other research, and actually use it to create conservation impact, which is the core of the work we're interested in. So it's not over yet with Mole specifically. There's more mapping to be done. This is a plan of the highway as they plan to expand it. So again, over here, the green lines are the recommendation the CEC's made in terms of realigning it, but this is very much on the drawing board. This is not, the highway is not done yet. Similarly, outside of Mole, the transmission line still cuts through other parts of Goa. At one point, it does seem to cut through part of Bondla Sanctuary as well, which is again a matter which we haven't heard too much about. I'm not sure what the clearance status for this is now, because they have applied for clearance through the eastern part of Bondla Sanctuary itself. So again, something to keep an eye on. I'm going to close with this video. It's about 15 seconds of Goa from drones. This is what we are working to conserve, and I think this is how I'm going to end my presentation. Yeah, that's it. Any questions? Yeah, Jack. The Supreme Court said that it can't go ahead, so they might have to reapply for permission. At this point, they have to use the old alignment which comes along the highway itself. Yes, on the old alignment, yeah. Yes? Not in my opinion, because it's open data anyway. Lots of the data we're using is from the government directly. So in a sense, they've made it open and we've weaponized it against them, is the way I would see it. But yeah, so that's the data is already with them in a case. We are collating lots of satellite imagery, which is also public and open source. There's lots of work from OpenStreetMap, other sources like that, which is again available to everybody. But I don't think from our perspective, the more data, the better, because again, we're on the side of truth, right? Is that the, yeah. So we are hoping to participate in a few exhibitions this year with around carbon. Again, so we're not artists. Sorry, yeah. The question was about using data for, again, for collaborations, including public. I'm guessing in terms of using it for public awareness, for exhibitions, etc. Right? If I've got it correctly. So we are doing some of that work. Again, we're happy to collaborate with artists on this. So again, with the Mole campaign, we're already working with Swabhu. We're talking to Nishant as well, other people about doing things which make the data more available to people. So yeah, that's very much on the table. Yeah, thank you. Okay.